Okay, we're back, and let's move on to moral development. So if you recall, we had talked all through childhood and adolescence about Kohlbergs' moral ladder. I wanted to add some additional little details and nuance to our understanding of moral development. One of the things that can start to appear in people who have internalized the notion that their group is stereotyped about certain things. Every group is stereotyped about something. Since I'm female, I'll use a female example. Females get the impression it's very clear to them that other people think that females can't drive as well, or I will even say very specifically that they can't parallel park as well as the other group, males. You see this across all different groups. Any of the Asians in my listening audience can attest that there's an assumption that they're probably going to be good at math and or science. That anybody who's Black in my audience will be attesting to the idea that they've been told that they should be good at basketball or things like that. Every group has some stereotype that they're aware of. They know that people have given them the impression you shouldn't be good at this or that you should be good at that. And we've all sort of internalized those stereotypes. And here's what's important, is that by internalizing those stereotypes, when we are put into a circumstance where we have the opportunity to show that stereotype does not apply to us as an individual, the fact that we know that there is a stereotype about us occupies some of our cognitive capacity. We're thinking to ourselves, okay, so I've got to do well on this because everybody thinks that insert whatever group I belong to doesn't do well on this. The fact that we're thinking that can actually take away some of our capacity and actually cause us to perform worse on the task than we would have if we weren't thinking those stereotypical threatening thoughts. So what we see, for example, in intelligence tests, on average, Asians outscore whites who outscore African Americans on average. And so if we were to administer an IQ test and say to the Asian students, now this is a test that your group tends to do really well on, so just have fun with it. And then tell the Blacks, this is a test that your group doesn't usually do very well on, so do your best. Activating the stereotype threat for the Blacks and the stereotype benefit for the Asians can actually cause those groups the members of that group to score in alignment with the stereotype more than they would have if nobody had said anything about stereotypes. So it's really important to keep in mind that when we're passing on stereotypical thinking, I just had a student the other day say to me, but isn't there some root of truth in every stereotype? There is, in the sense that for a group, we do see differences in certain behaviors, like for example with the IQ test that I've already talked about. For groups, we may see differences. But the important thing is that we don't know for an individual how they're going to perform. There's a lot of variation within groups. But when we activate stereotype threat in a person, it can cause them to perform worse, or will cause them to perform worse than they would have because they're cognitively focused on trying to disprove the threat, trying to disprove the stereotype. And that takes away some of their cognitive capacity. And then, of course, the person who has activated the threat in the person thinks they're justified. See, I knew it. You were going to do worse because of whatever group you belong to. I always feel like that every time I'm trying to parallel park in front of my husband. I swear, he has never seen me smoothly parallel park because I swear, every time we pull into a place where I'm going to park, he'll say, okay, now, really be aware that there's this tree over there. And I'm like, shut up, I can drive. And then next thing you know, it takes me 2 attempts to pull into the spot. It's like, why did this take me 2 attempts? Well, largely because he doubted my abilities, and it really activated my own self-doubt. So part of moral development has to do with internalizing these messages about who we are and how we should be and things like that. And sometimes it can be helpful if the stereotype is that we are in a group that does well. Sometimes it can be helpful, but more commonly it's going to be harmful. Some people wonder, what's the likelihood that a person will end up in post-conventional morality? I put a question mark there because, Kohlberg thought that as our brains mature, we should move into post-conventional morality. But what we find is that not everybody moves into that. So I thought I'd make a little graphic that illustrates that the responsibilities that we've carried across our lifetime, plus experiences that we've had, plus our level of education, all factor into the kinds of moral decisions we make. And if you recall from earlier in development, Kohlberg measured moral development through these moral questions that, very much like the way Piaget designed his tests, it wasn't really about what your answer was, but instead your reasoning for your answer on the moral questions. One of the things that emerged in Kohlberg's research, and I think I mentioned this before, is that females are much more likely to make comments like, oh, this sounds like something that happened to my sister, and then go on to make their moral decision. And as soon as they say sister, they get placed into the conventional level of morality because Kohlberg says, well, see, they referred to somebody else. And so that implies that they're bound up in social norms and what other people think of them. So we see gender differences that might have more to do with how the test is scored than the actual reasoning. We do see that females are more likely to display a morality of care, like worrying about the person in the story more. Whereas males are more likely to display a morality of justice, where they're like, well, that's not fair or that's unethical. So I thought maybe it would be interesting to see one of Kohlberg's questions. And so this will sound really familiar if you've seen Les Miserables. So just he kind of took the Les Miserables story. So it says, in Europe, a woman was near death from a very bad disease, a special kind of cancer. There was one drug that the doctors thought might save her. It was a form of radium that a druggist in the same town had recently discovered. The drug was expensive to make, but the druggist was charging 10 times what the drug cost him to make. He paid $200 for the radium and charged $2,000 for a small dose of the drug. The sick woman's husband, Heinz, went to everyone he knew to borrow the money, but he could get together only about $1,000, which was half of what it cost. He told the druggist that his wife was dying and asked him to sell it cheaper or to let him pay later, but the druggist said, no, I discovered the drug and I'm going to make money from it. Heinz got desperate and broke into the man's store to steal the drug for his wife. All right, so your job, if you were in Kohlberg's morality situation, would be to say, was Heinz wrong? Was it immoral for Heinz to break into the druggist's store and steal the drug? And it doesn't matter what really, from Kohlberg's perspective, whether you say, yes, it's wrong for Heinz to do it, or no, it wasn't wrong. What he was interested in was your logic. So if you said, yes, it was wrong because, we've got property rights and it would be unethical or unfair for him to just steal whatever he wants, and then, maybe extrapolate out to, well, what if I just stole, I need to eat, so what if I just stole the food, right? Other people would say, no, it's not wrong for Heinz to steal it because this is a life or death decision, and those ethics are more important than property rights. So you could have yes and no answers that are both based on ethics, right? Or you could have yes or no answers that are attributable to more conventional level things. Like, for example, well, if I don't think Heinz should steal it because it's against the law and everybody else will think he's a thief, right? So we're concerned about law and order and other people's opinions. Or if I say, yes, Heinz should steal it, and then he should tell everybody that the druggist was such a miser that he wouldn't help save Heinz's wife. And then, everybody will know what a bad guy the druggist is. So we're concerned about, again, conventional level things if we gave that kind of answer. If we were going to be pre-conventional about it, we might say something like, it's not wrong for Heinz to steal it unless he gets caught, in which case then it's wrong. So that's very pre-conventional. I'm just worried about punishment or not. Or it's right for Heinz to steal it because he'll get the reward of his wife living, and he'll be able to be happy because his wife lives. And so we're expressing the kind of reasoning where we're concerned about the reward we might get. So, you could answer yes or no and be at any of the levels. It's really about your reasoning that determines. And I just gave a couple samples of what you might say in response to this. You might have even different answers. But women in the subject samples have oftentimes displayed concern for care. And so they'd be like, well, his wife's life is more important than any laws. is going to be a more common explanation among females. Males would be more likely to say things that had to do with justice. So, asking 10 times what it cost him to make is unjust. And especially when Heinz in good faith got up half the amount and his wife's life is in the balance, it would be unjust to make Heinz wait until he could afford it outright. Of course, some of you might be thinking to yourself, why doesn't anybody have any insurance in this story? That's a whole other issue. Something else. They didn't have that at the time the story was written. All right. Now, I thought you guys might find this interesting. Fowler was interested in how we develop a sense of faith. A lot of times when I talk about morality, a lot of times people think I'm talking about religion, and I'm not. Fowler is actually talking about religion. And he's talking about how as we age, we go through different stages of understanding. And so he thought that up until 18, we're really just sort of not ready for the messages that would go along with whatever our faith is. And by 18, we start to become more individual reflective and able to display an active commitment to our faith. And then as we age, we continue to develop more depth to the level of understanding and commitment. So with age, we see more and more post-formal reasoning being employed in our faith decisions. And he thought that the maximum devotion to the faith would be the universalizing, and that most people don't get to that point, that you live your life in service of others and like that. Most of us don't get to that point, he thinks. So I thought you guys might find that kind of interesting, since talking about morality always brings this idea of faith into most people's minds. All right, let's talk about why you're bothering to go to college. Why am I going through this exercise? The benefits of college. Well, one of the things that has been established over and over and over again is that people who have gone to college tend to enjoy better health over their lifespan. They also, of course, this is hopefully part of what you learn in college, is how to reason better. You pick up skills that hopefully you'll use on your job. A lot of my students in Lifespan are planning to become nursing majors, and you're taking this as a prerequisite, and you're going to be learning specific vocational skills. Other people who are taking this class might be psych majors, and you might not learn necessarily specific vocational skills, but instead the better reasoning is what's going to benefit you in the work world. And then wider knowledge is going to benefit everybody, right? Where you're going to know things, you're going to be exposed to things that you wouldn't have gotten probably in your everyday life if you hadn't gone to college. Let's focus in on the better health issue. After I've guilted you a bunch of times about getting more exercise, one thing is that people who have been to college exercise more than people who haven't been to college. So maybe it's because we guilt you about it more often in class, I don't know. They're less likely to smoke. And maybe, again, it's because when you've got higher levels of education, maybe you are more aware of the risks. They tend to eat better. And that all of those things may be the factors that lead better health to be associated with living longer. So people who have been to college tend to have longer lifespans than people who haven't been to college. So if you're going to college for none of those other three reasons, living longer seems like a pretty reasonable reason to go to college. But your wider knowledge base might be one of the factors for why you've got better health and why you live longer. Of course, I would like to point out, we're going to start to notice this as we get into adulthood, that better health is associated with higher income all the time. And so going to college and getting those vocational skills and reasoning skills and knowledge skills that make you a better employee will make you a higher paid employee. And that may be the key one factor that contributes to better health and longer life. We've seen a lot of changes in college students. Unfortunately, they haven't updated these demographics since 2010, but I think the numbers are either stable or maybe even changing into a more diverse number pool. So we're seeing that there are more women than men in college right now, that more than a third and probably pushing more towards half of students nowadays go part-time. And then we're seeing demographic numbers that are better mirroring the larger population. African Americans make up about 13% of the population, and they make up about 13% of college students. Hispanics make up about 15% of the population and only 12% of the college students, but that's pretty good representation. Asians make up about 4% of the population and about 7% of college students. Native Americans, they are appropriately represented in college relative to their percentage in the population. And the international number is the one that is going up. Students who are actually citizens of another country and are attending school in the US, that's actually been going up. I think it's closer to 5% today. And then what's really interesting is that older and older students are coming back and going back to school. I oftentimes in my lifespan class have students who say, can I just interview myself for the returning student project, because I return to school, and they feel like they're old. They're like, I'm 24 and so I'm a returning student. My assignment, by the way, says it has to be somebody over 40, because being 24 is not that unusual. That's considered reasonably young for college students these days. So yeah, we see that college has gotten a lot more diverse. More people are taking advantage of the opportunity to go to college. More people are seeing the value in getting a college education to help them towards their vocational goals. And also, it's something that we can do during emerging adulthood before we're really ready to move on to the next stage of making a commitment. So, some of you, I mentioned psych majors and I mentioned nursing majors, but a lot of you might be just going, I'm going to get my general AA, or I'm going to get a bachelor's degree in interdisciplinary studies because I really don't know what I want to major in. But I'm going to put one foot in front of the other, and I'm going to get my degree, and I'll figure it out later. And that's really normal too. A lot of us are sort of still striving during this period of time, and college gives us that opportunity to explore things. All right, well, that concludes cognitive development, so I'll see you in the chapter on social development next.